Welcome everybody to our brand new webinar, How to Command Identity Access Control Across Your Cloud Infrastructure. Today, our presenters include Manish Rathod, who's our lead cloud architect here at Comtact, and we're delighted to be joined by Okta's Alliances Solutions Engineer, James Richmond, who will also be taking us through a demo later on. So without further ado, I will hand over to our first presenter this morning, who will be Manish.
Thanks, Daisy. Thank you, everyone, for joining this event. I'm Manish Rathod, the lead cloud architect for Comtact. With the advent of the cloud technologies and SaaS application in the modern day IT workforce and IT applications, we see identity as one of the cornerstones for integrating the services. Now, all looks good on the surface once the applications are integrated, cloud is integrated. But once you start into the life cycle of this new journey, there are some challenges that come up. And those are the challenges that we are trying to talk today as part of this presentation. Now, the three top challenges that we're looking to address in today's presentation is user friction, IT operations overhead, and IT leadership challenges. Now, the most problem that comes in is from the user friction, and then that leads into IT operations overheads, and that again leads into IT leadership challenges. So some of the problems in the user friction space is about password fatigue, where users go on a holiday, they forget their passwords. And then they come in and then they, ring the service desk and say, what's my password? So we want to address that. Consistency between remote office working and remote and office working, where they see two different screens and they're confused what's going on. And along with that, we have users trying to access the application on various platforms like mobile applications or on their Mac or on their Windows PC. They see different screens, and again, they're confused. And this leads to a gap and where a phishing attack can happen, and that's a security issue for you. That comes on to your IT operation overheads, where a staff joins in, his account has to be enabled, he has to have an MFA enabled, and then when he leaves, everything has to be disabled. Now, that's a cumbersome process. We need a mechanism where, everything is aligned. A user joins in, everything is automated at the time he leaves. By the time in midnight he leaves, everything is gone, and your estate is protected. This also leads to some directory corruptions, and as a result, there are problems in the application interface where people cannot log in because the account is corrupted, and that causes downtimes for you. And it also has a risky login activity. So for example, someone logging in from UK, and then at the same time logging in from somewhere far away from Asia Pac, there is no way we can detect, whether this login is a legitimate login or the account is compromised. So we need to address that situation. At the same time, we want to keep on top of application integrations and different authentication frameworks. So some vendor use SAML, some vendor use OAuth, some vendor use Shibboleth. So we need to ensure that all authentication frameworks are accounted for. That leads us into leadership challenges. We don't know how our users are doing. We don't know how our operations teams are doing. So we can't say, is the cost optimized? How our service is going to be? And then are we implementing our best practices? To answer all these questions, we have invited James today from Okta, who is going to take us through how Okta solves these challenges and give us a short presentation and demo. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Manish. So I'll just make sure that we're all sharing as we should be. So you should be able to see my screen right now. I think that should be going through nicely. There we go. So thank you for the introduction there. So my name is James Richmond. I'm an Alliances Solutions Engineer here at Okta. My job entails me working with customers to solve their identity and access management challenges that Okta focuses on in our portfolio. So without further ado, got a few slides to run through, and what I want you to go away with today is an understanding of not only what Okta can do for you in terms of solving those challenges, but also give you a demonstration of those basic use cases that we can help you to achieve very quickly as well in your organization. So let's actually take a look at what Okta actually stands for. So as you can see here, we are here to enable any organization to safely use any technology, and that is our vision. And we do this using a number of different solutions that we have in our portfolio, because at the end of the day, we don't want you to be pinned with a particular vendor, and we don't want you to put you through as an organization that rip and replace process. So how do we actually achieve this, and what are these use cases that we look at achieving using our solution set? Well, as you can see here, we've got a number of different audiences that we work with, or different identities that we work with, ranging from not just customers, but also to your workforce, your partners, or any other audience that works with your organization. And with Okta Identity Cloud, we can allow you to put access management and access controls in place to protect not only your applications, if they're on-premise or in the cloud, but also your infrastructure and your APIs. And we do this using a number of different platform services that we have here. Think of these as microservices, and these all come together to form our complete product set. Now, I've highlighted 4 in particular here that are in bold, and you'll see that we've got that single sign-on, the universal directory, the adaptive MFA, and the lifecycle management there that we're going to be providing a bit more detail on today and giving you a demonstration on these. As you can probably tell, there are 2 main areas here that we actually focus on here at Okta, one being that customer identity. We're all a customer of a service out there, and we all want to manage our own data and change the services we're being provided. Okta can provide the underlying authentication and authorization piece here, and that identity and access management that you need to protect not only your employees, but your customers that are using your platform. And then moving across into something that we'll be looking at in a bit more detail today, that is the workforce identity. And our workforce identity does consist of many, or a vast selection of products, of which, as I've already mentioned, we will be focusing in on 4 today, that being that single sign-on experience, the universal directory, the spine of how we can store all of the identities you have in your organization, whether they're currently managed within different directories or different applications, and giving you a central source of management. And that's before we look at other areas such as the lifecycle management. How do we provision the correct access for the correct person at the right time, so ensuring they have the correct access on day one. But of course, so far we've seen so far as how we can make an end user experience seamless, how we can remove that friction, but we can also enhance that security at the same time using that adaptive MFA. And that gives us the capability, as Manish mentioned earlier, of actually knowing where the location of where a user is authenticating from, looking at a pattern of where they've authenticated from in the past, comparing it to this latest authentication amongst many other variables such as the devices they use, their job role, essentially encompassing their whole identity into the process and that risk engine for determining whether we want to give access or maybe we want to prompt them for additional factors of authentication. So let's take a look at this in a bit more detail as to how we can do this. But firstly, what I want to reiterate is here is how we make this possible. And that's done by the adhesive, as I call it, of the integration network. And the integration network currently consists of over 7,000 integrations out of the box, of which many of these also support those advanced integrations for those APIs to give you the capability to provision and have that lifecycle management piece, ensuring that your administrators are no longer having to complete those manual tasks that they were doing before. It's also worth mentioning here, and I think there is actually a question to ask ourselves here of how do we actually provide this service and ensure that we are providing all of this functionality that we've mentioned so far? Well, all of this wouldn't be possible without what I call the spine of our identity cloud, without the following architecture. We provide an always-on platform, shielding and protected by a layer of health checking that's automatically built in and determines the health of each cell that you can see here are scattered around the globe to support our wide range of customers in all of the different regions and the many different countries. With the cells located across the globe, supporting customers in every region, this enables us to provide that 99.99% uptime that we have actually achieved in the last 2 years. And as can be seen here in the number of stats that we provided here, this high availability we know is essential for your organizations to ensure that you are guaranteed no downtime, especially if you're working with customers, and especially if you've got employees within your organization that need to continually access any of their applications or perform any maintenance. And we know how important this is to you for this uptime. Some organizations do suffer that downtime occasionally. As we may have experienced in the last few weeks, there have been a number of services that have outages. But as you can see here, the uptime in 2019 and the uptime in 2020, numbers speak value here in terms of how we've achieved this. And we ensure that this is one of our main objectives, is to provide that guaranteed uptime for your organizations. So returning here to what we actually provide in our portfolio and how we actually are going to apply this today inside of the demonstration, we're going to be concentrating on 4 main product areas, 4 main pillars. And these 4 pillars, as I mentioned earlier, consist of that single sign-on, the ability to get rid of those credentials and move across to more secure authentication protocols such as SAML or WS Federation, all of which made possible by that universal directory, which will determine the access that your employees or maybe even your customers or partners that work with you have within your organization, allowing you to have one unified identity across all of those different directories and your applications. And then, of course, the lifecycle management part, ensuring that we can provision the correct access for your employees, but also during the whole JML process. So if someone moves into a different role, we can ensure they have the correct access to actually be able to complete that. And then finally, with the adaptive MFA, which we'll see later on as to how we can secure applications, how we can secure your Okta dashboard, and how we can either prompt for MFA or deny access altogether based upon the different variables that we are continually analysing against the authentication that a user is trying to complete. But firstly, before we actually move into a demonstration, I wanted to take you through a number of different areas that Okta provides in terms of its solution set, how these can apply to the main 3 aims here of how we can achieve the perfect workforce identity. The first of which being seamlessly access everything. How do we ensure that your end users are given a frictionless experience to access all of their applications? And how do we make sure there's not going to be any pushback here from them? We'll be taking a little bit more detail in that in a second. Then we have the reduction in IT friction. So how do we automate everything when it comes to that JML process? And then the final point here of how we can enhance that security using Okta's adaptive MFA to ensure that we're not only providing a seamless experience to our end users, but also enhancing security around those applications that they are using. So let's drill in here into how we can seamlessly access everything as an end user. Well, as you can see in this diagram here, we have our employees, our partners, our contractors, whatever audience it may be or identity is going to be there on the left. And we're going to be looking continually at the identity of these different people that are accessing our resources that you can see on the right there, basing our judgment on the experience they get to access these resources on the variables that we're continually analysing on them, such as their device they're using, the location they're authenticating from, maybe where they're meant to be based in the world. All of these different factors are taken into account to determine the experience we provide to them to the resources we see on the right. And we mentioned earlier that it's not just applications which can support here, it's also the APIs, it's also the infrastructure that you may be accessing, whether that's via SSH or IDP. All of which can be provided with a secure passwordless experience. We'll see that a little bit of detail later on as to how we can get rid of passwords forever. As I mentioned before, all of this experience can be done or via any device that you are choosing to use. And that modern user experience is what separates us from the rest, because the dashboard that gives you the capability of accessing all of these applications is available on pretty much any device you use, whether that's your laptop or your mobile phone on the right. All of these experiences are seamless when accessing those applications. As we can see on the left, it can also be done using a passwordless experience, taking advantage of a push to authenticate method such as Okta Verify. So how do we make the lives of our IT administration easier? Well, we can reduce the IT friction. We can automate absolutely everything. And when we look at automation, there are 2 main parts to this. There's the IT side, how we can collate all of those different identities across all of our different applications and directories and store these in one place. And then we have the user side. How do we actually provision those different applications ready for when someone starts in our side of our organization, removing that continual manual process. So we'll see later on as to how we can do this, but these are the two main parts here for how we'll focus in on this. But firstly, the universal directory. How do we make this all happen? Well, the universal directory acts as a central point of management for all of your different directories and different applications, allowing you to have that bidirectional travel or flow of information between these, essentially allowing us to base the access for all of our users on all of this information that we have stored on them in the past, and removing the need to manage or update this information in multiple places. We then have our Lifecycle Management module, which gives you the capability of provisioning, deprovisioning those accounts within those applications for you, and even the capability of having granular provisioning here, so we can actually provide a very granular layer of access within those different applications. So for example, here we could go into Salesforce, we could assign a specific region or a specific account to a particular user based on the identity that we have stored against them. And then finally, in the enhancement of security. And when we say the enhancement of security, we're looking at when a user goes to actually access a specific resource, whether that's an application or a server. As you can see on the left here, the different signals that we look at, the different variables are the network they're accessing from, the location, the device. All of this can also be extended with an additional security stack there and a very wide range of integrations available with those third parties that we can allow you to extend the capabilities of those access policies. The risk engine acts, as it says on the tin, analysing that risk, analysing all of those different signals on those particular users against previous authentications, and allow us to determine whether we're going to allow access to those resources or potentially prompt for additional factors of authentication. And then the threat insight in the bottom left, this is essentially our global insights. Because of Okta's wide range or diverse range of customers contained around the globe, we are continually analysing and looking out for any malicious actions that may be completed by particular IPs. And because of this, we can then protect and extend this protection across to all of our different tenants all around the world, adding added protection here, mainly from something that's been spotted within someone else's tenant. And this can be done using adaptive multi-factor authentication. And as you can see on the right here, this is the MFA flow in action. As an end user, if I don't meet one of the conditions that I have in place, I will be denied access to the dashboard and will not be able to access any of the resources provided to me. And as you can see here, if we do fail in one of the tests or one of the conditions in place, it could be that we're using a Tor browser, it could be that we're using an unknown device, or maybe authenticating from a new location. This can determine the experience that I get as an end user when accessing any of the resources I need to do my job. So now I would like to take you through, that's the end of the slides there, it's not the end of the webinar of course, but it's the end of the slides there. I want to take you through a demonstration of how Okta can actually achieve these goals that we've spoken about before in a demonstration. So I'm just going to move across here, just to make sure I'm in the right window. There we go, let's move that across. I'm going to take you through the experience that I would get as an end user. So to tell you a story of what organization I actually have that I'm showing you here, I have a number of domains that I own, and they're all based on things that I love, and one of them is actually ice cream. So my organization, Rich Scoops, has a number of different users contained within this organization that do many different roles for me. Justin Chin is the user that I will be showing you today, and essentially what's happening under the hood is Justin Chin, we're an organization that has a hybrid IT approach, and I want to continue using our Active Directory to allow access to our applications, but I want to provide that single sign-on based approach. And actually later on down the line, I want to get rid of passwords altogether. So let me take you through the story of how we're going to be doing this with Justin Chin. Well, firstly, Justin Chin has actually just come back from a long holiday, and he has actually forgotten his password. It's been a while. He's had to rotate it recently just before he went away, and he has forgotten that. We've all been through that experience. So how do we actually aim to resolve this problem for Justin Chin without him having to contact a service desk or actually open a ticket? Well, Justin Chin can very easily do a self-service password reset. He can do this via SMS, he can do it via a voice call, he can do it via email. In this case, I'm simply going to go down the SMS route, and in the background on my mobile device, I'm going to be sent a code right now, and by typing this in like so, I can go ahead and answer an additional question here on my profile to actually complete that password reset, which is what food do I least like as a child. and then we can go ahead and can complete a password reset. Now, it's worth highlighting here that this reset that I'm completing is actually being against my Active Directory. So when I reset this password, this is replicated across Active Directory, and I will then be taken to the dashboard like so. So all very well for Justin Chin. He's just come back from his holiday. He's done his password reset within a matter of seconds. He now needs to access those applications he needs to do his job. We can see here that these are all of our different apps that we have on the dashboard, all very customizable for how you want it to have that look and feel within your organization. What you'll also see here is how we can put access controls in place to prevent access based on those signals that we mentioned earlier on. We can see here that I can't actually access Workday at the moment. That's because I am not conforming to the policy that I have in place, mainly because I'm not on my Office network. But I can have access to a number of other applications. For instance, Salesforce, I can use that SAML-based authentication to have very quick access into these applications. It could be the case that Justin Chin actually needs to cover for another employee while they're going on holiday, and at the present, he hasn't actually got access to that Twitter application. So let's actually take you through the flow of Justin putting a request in to be able to gain access to additional applications and show you how easy it can be done. So I can simply go to the add apps as Justin Chin, and I can put a request in here for Twitter, need this to cover for marketing. And what's going to actually happen in the background is this going to be processed and sent as a request to the manager of Justin Chin. Now you won't see that Twitter's here yet, but if I actually return to the administrator side of things for my tenant, I will go in as Jimmy.Richmond. As you can see here, we'll sign in. And when I've authenticated, you'll see that I'll be taken to my dashboard. I've actually got a prompt for MFA there, but we'll show you later on as to how we can implement that. But what you will see on the left here is I have a number of tasks that have come in. One of which is the request from Justin Chin. Now I could add a comment, which will be actually collected in the logs, but I'm going to go ahead and just simply approve that. When I return back to Justin Chin and refresh this page, you'll now see that he has access to that Twitter application. And when we click on that, it's actually going to be using a protocol that we provide here at Okta, which is secure web authentication. And this is actually my ice cream page. Not quite sure why we're getting some of those posts on there, but as you can see, I was able to authenticate into that particular application using SWA, which is secure web authentication, and that is made possible by the Okta browser plugin, which is used within my Chrome browser. Now, the reason why I've used this SWA application is because not every application supports the likes of SAML, WS Federation, or OADC, so we need to be able to provide you the capability of integrating with those applications that may not support it. So from an end user experience, that is exactly what I wanted to show you today for that single sign-on, but I'm going to show you how we can actually onboard a brand new user into the organization, and then show you a little bit later on as to how we can make their life easier by removing passwords altogether. So I'm going to take you over to the administrator side of our tenant, which is my Rich Scoops tenant again, and you can see all of the information presented right now on the integrations I currently have completed, as well as the service status of Okta. The first thing we're going to do is actually create a brand new user, but I'm also going to take you through the journey of how we can present access for this particular user as well. Now, this has been done using groups and group rules, and as you can see here, I have the capability of using existing groups from within Active Directory or any of your applications. And if we do a quick search here for my sales one, you will actually see that I have a sales apps group, which I'm going to be using today to determine the access I'm going to be given to my employees. Now, at the moment, there are a couple of applications that I will assign to this. For one, I will be providing Office 365, a very common application that we will use on a day-to-day basis, and we can do that license management from within the Okta portal as well. So we'll go ahead and save that. We'll just go with that for now. Actually, I will add one more. We'll add Salesforce in there. And when we go in and add Salesforce, again, able to do that license management for that application too. So we'll go ahead, add those two applications. Essentially, whenever a user is added to this particular group, they will instantly have these accounts provisioned for them. Now, at the moment, there are no members of this group. And as an administrator, I don't want to have to keep updating all of these different groups to ensure that they get the correct access. So what we can do is I'm going to create some rules in place to actually put this into place. Now you can see here I actually have a group rule already set up. I'm simply going to create a new one just to show you how we can have multiple rules set up here. So sales standard apps, and we can look at particular attribute. For instance, we can look at the department attribute stored in universal directory, and we can have standard set as the value there. So if, for instance, we do want to add a user to a particular group using a rule, we can automate this process using the attributes that we store on a particular identity. And then we can state here sales apps as the group that we want them to be added to. And as soon as they become a member of that group, they will be provisioned those applications that I showed you a moment ago. So we'll simply save that. We will now go and activate it. So whenever that attribute is actually altered, which if we look at this again, you'll see the user department is equal to standard, they will simply be added to that. Now we'll just turn these other ones off quickly just so that's all correct. But essentially, whenever we have a user department equal to standard, they will be assigned to this group. And by being a member of that group, they will be assigned the applications that they require to do their job. So let's go into our universal directory. Let's create a brand new user. Let's go with Sean Smith, and we'll just put in here what we want the details to be. We'll give him that domain. We won't add him into any group right now. I'm not going to take you through the user experience here of how we can very easily get an email and activate our account. I'm simply going to set the password as an administrator so we can quickly sign in the moment and actually show you that. So let's go ahead and save it. Let's go ahead and find Sean, if I can type his name correctly. And inside of Sean, at the moment, you'll see he has no applications assigned to him. Not a member of any group either. What we will do is we'll go into profile, we'll go to his department, and we will put in here standard as we required before to determine his access that he will be given. So as soon as I click save, that rule will now apply to him. He will be added to that sales apps group, which we can see there. And in the background, what will be happening is we will be provisioning 2 applications for Sean Smith. So the Office 365 and Salesforce. So if we move back across to the end user perspective, we will now sign in as Sean Smith. And I'll provide the password here. And when we go into the dashboard, before we go into the dashboard, sorry, because it's a brand new user, we will also need to provide some additional details so he can complete his own password resets in the future too. So I'm just going to go ahead here and put Beetroot, never been a huge fan of it. We'll go with create my account, and now we'll be taken to the dashboard, and what you'll see straight away is we have all of the applications that have been provisioned for me based on my role. So for instance, if I want to go to my email now, which has just been provisioned for me, I can go into that very, very easily. And you'll see here how I'm taken into my email account, which has literally just been created for me a few seconds ago, using that lifecycle management piece that Okta can offer here. And as you can see here, in as Sean Smith. If we return back to that dashboard, you'll also see how we can access Salesforce. That was another application that we provisioned a moment ago for him to use. And what you'll see here is that seamless authentication into Sean Smith's account, all of which were brand new when we created it a moment ago. So what have we seen so far? Well, we've seen that single sign-on experience. We've seen the lifecycle management. We've seen how we can make the lives of our administrators far easier. But what we haven't seen is how we make our end users' experience even more secure and potentially make their experience into those applications even more seamless too. So what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to return back into Justin Chin's account. Justin was our end user earlier. He's pretty fed up with passwords at the moment, actually, and he's been asking for a while now whether he can use other additional factors or authentication to replace these. And yes, we can do that. But the one thing I want to highlight here is how do we actually enforce security on these applications and then take that one step further with securing and providing a seamless experience. So let's return back over to the administrator dashboard for Okta. And I'm just going to go to one of our applications, in this case, Salesforce. Now, if you remember rightly, when we looked at Salesforce earlier with Justin, he had that seamless experience into that particular application and wasn't prompted for any additional factor of authentication. Now, what you will see here is I've actually gone to an application Salesforce inside of my Okta tenant, and you'll see that we have sign-on policies below. These are our application sign-on policies. When we go into one that's already existing, you'll see that we can configure this based on a number of different conditions. So we can actually base it on a membership of group, a location in the world, even the client they're using, as well as the integration with MDM solutions out there, such as Intune or many others. We're pretty agnostic in that space, so we support them all. And that gives you the capability of stating whether it is a corporate issue device or not. And then we can state at the bottom, what do we want to do if they meet these conditions? Well, we can deny access, or we can allow it and we can prompt for a factor of authentication, which is what I'm going to be doing here. So now that's turned on, let's return back over to Justin Chin. And what will now happen when I actually access Salesforce is I'm actually going to be prompted for a factor of authentication, just as we've seen there. Now, we do support a number of different factors out of the box. Won't be able to show you those today in terms of what they actually consist of, but one of which I'm being prompted for right now is Okta Verified, but we also support the likes of FIDO2, so I could use a fingerprint biometrics here for being able to access that application as well, which is what I'm going to do on this basis, providing a seamless experience for being able to access that particular application. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Justin is really fed up with passwords, and we can provide a passwordless approach to this, but we may only want to enroll it a few users at a time. So what we can do is we can sign out from Justin Chin. We go back to the dashboard here before he had to provide a password, and we're going to return back over to the admin side of my tenant. And we're going to go to a different section this time. We're going to go to the authentication part, and we're simply going to go to the sign-on policies for my particular tenant. Now, very much the same as the application sign-on policies, we're going to be looking here at how we can provide a passwordless experience. So this is currently turned off. Let's go ahead and activate that. But let's go and look at the rule that I've got in place. And what you will see is this is pretty much very similar to that application sign-on policy that we had before. But in this case, we can actually set up a factor sequencing to determine the course of authentication that the end user has to complete before they can gain access to Okta. So we'll see here FIDO2 followed by Okta Verify, and we can have multiple chains if we want to, determined by what factor they want to use. So let's go ahead and update that. That's all turned on, and let's return back over to Justin Chin. He's one of our first ever users to experience passwordless into his applications. And as soon as I type in Justin Chin's username, he can complete that passwordless experience using his biometrics, followed by a push to authenticate, which has come over to my phone right now. Simply approve that. And in we go into the dashboard without any passwords. And then we can take that one step further by going into another application such as Salesforce and having that complete passwordless experience from the very moment we sign in all the way into those applications. So that was everything I wanted to show you today in terms of the end user experience, how we can reduce the friction for our IT administrators and make that as seamless as possible, and focus in on how we can enforce security around those applications and enhance that security, as well as making a passwordless experience there. So now I'm going to pass back over to Daisy, who's going to take you through some cleaning up of slides, and then we'll be able to open up to any questions if anyone has anything.
Thank you, James, for that, and thank you to Manish as well. So we will be sending a very quick 3-question survey in the next few minutes. This is just so we can ask your thoughts on how you found this session and what you would like for us to cover in future webinars so that we can really tailor to your needs. We will be giving £20 to support the charity Fair Share for every complete survey received. Fair Share provides 1 million meals a week for vulnerable people in the UK, so we're very happy to be supporting them at the moment. Secondly, this afternoon we will email you an on-demand link to this webinar to share with any colleagues that you think could help or would like to know more information about our services and how we work with Okta. Finally, we'd like to give you a heads up on our next webinar. This one is partnered with SentinelOne, and it will focus on cybersecurity post-COVID in a more flexible working environment, and that's in 3 weeks' time, so you'll receive some information regarding that webinar later on. Please do get in touch with us. We'd be delighted to talk more about what you've heard today or how Comtact can help you and how obviously we use Okta in order to do this. Our contact details are on the screen at the moment, but it will also be included in the emails that will be provided very shortly. So now I would like to take it over to our Q&A section. We've actually got quite a lot of questions come through, which Jimmy and Manish will be answering between them. So the first one we've had through is, what is the workflow as demonstrated for self-service passwords?
So the workflow for that is, it's essentially because of the delegated authentication integration with Active Directory, which uses a very lightweight agent. It simply gives the capability of our profile mastered users from AD to be able to initiate a password reset there from the dashboard very easily, selecting the option there whether to unlock their account or self-service password reset. We've also got the capability of actually enforcing password policies there as well via Okta 2. So I don't know if that answers your question as to where you were going with that, but that's how it works.
Yeah, and then it further enhances with your passwordless experience, right? So if you enable passwordless, so your self-service password thing becomes a bit of a redundant thing, isn't it? It's a thing of the past at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. The password will always remain inside of Active Directory, but with the passwordless experience, you will no longer have to provide it unless there's an application out there outside of Okta that requires it.
Yeah.
Great. And the next question, what's the workflow for non-standard apps like Twitter?
So the workflow there is just application request-based policies. These are essentially, they're actually created inside of the Okta dashboard on an application by application basis. So you can simply add them to the self-service request-based applications. So, and you can add approval flows there. So you are able to have managers manage certain applications in the event of a request coming in.
Great. And then how can you use Microsoft Hello as authentication?
So yes, we do support Windows Hello for the authentication part inside of Okta. So we have a number of different authenticators, we call it here, for our MFA types that we support, and Windows Hello is one of those that will be using or taking advantage of the FIDO2, especially if you want to use the integration with face recognition or facial recognition, sorry. So we allow you to actually go completely passwordless and use Windows Hello if you wanted to as well. So that's the capability there of using that.
Perfect, great. And what about elevating admin permissions? What's the workflow there?
So that's quite a broad area that we could go into with that. In terms of ad permissions, from a perspective of Okta providing admin experience into other applications, that would potentially, well, we could do that using lifecycle management. So when you provide the access to an application, you have got the capability with that integration into applications to state what their role will be within those applications. However, that would be a permanent, or not necessarily permanent until you make a change within that application role. However, you could have this set for a period of time using advanced lifecycle management, what Okta does, using workflows. So we could put a time perspective in place. So an end user could be made an admin of an application while someone is away. It could be the case we have an approval flow in there for that as well. But there's a lot of different ways we can look into that further. It's quite a big topic of conversation, and it kind of goes away from what we looked at today and goes into a more advanced sort of set of products that we have here at Okta, but it can be done using what we would call Okta workflows.
Great. And our last question that we had come through was, we have around 1,000 users in-house, and I'm comfortable with those. However, we also operate some public-facing web portals with over 1 million registered users. Could you elaborate a little on how Okta could address this need?
I think that would definitely require a conversation to go over and get a bit more detail on how that would work, because definitely we can provide a solution to that. The architecture behind it, it's not a easy answer to give, depending on a number of different variables and factors there for how we could do it. But for those public facing web portals, you could definitely provide the authentication underneath them using Okta very easily, using our sign-in widget, especially if they're customer facing. If they are customer facing, then we do have that customer identity part for what Okta does. And that would give you the capability of actually giving your end users the ability to use MFA when accessing those accounts, even the ability to go passwordless in the long term if you wanted to as well. Now, we do have a hub and spoke approach that we can do here, especially for that, depending on the different factors and variables there. But it definitely would be a bigger conversation to take that offline and chat about for sure.
Just to add there, James, this can also do integration with Facebook and Google and stuff like that, right? So, you know, for answering the question about web portals with external users, right? So that can be facilitated through Okta, right?
Absolutely. So we do support social authentication. So we can use the likes of Facebook, LinkedIn, Apple, amongst others, to authenticate into Okta, especially for the customer identity part. So
Yeah.
if you did want to bring your own identity, that is something we also support here at Okta for providing access. But then we're moving more into that sort of customer identity area with that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you guys. Well, that's all the questions that we've had come through, and that's all the time we have for today. So just another big thank you to Okta and James for joining us today on this webinar, and a big thank you to Manish for presenting for Comtact. Like mentioned earlier, our contact details are on the screen at the moment. If you have any further questions that you would like us to answer, and how we get support from Okta in these instances, then please get in touch with us, and thank you for joining today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.